Welcome to The First Turn. I'm your host, Hyena, and today, Llama and I are talking about This Week in Warhammer. If you like what you hear, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, or let us know if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. Alright, let's get to it. Welcome to The First Turn. I'm Hyena.
I'm Llama.
Today we're talking about, a slow week in Warhammer. We're going to have a lot of slow weeks leading up to the end of the year, I think.
Yep.
We're going to have some balance passes come out occasionally, but for the most part, we're wrapped up with releases for the year.
Yeah.
And so we've been kind of branching out and looking at some other stuff, which we might talk about here. I know we've been playing some different games. Some video games recently, because a couple of good ones have come out. I know I beat Space Marine 2, the main campaign for that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't terribly long. I played a little bit of the other side missions, which were fun, but the longevity of it, I feel like, it's not what I want, right? So in other games that are similar, like Vermintide, for example, you have to complete the missions and you get like little drop boxes that you open up and you get random gear, which then you could break down and craft stuff. Or it's not really like gacha-y, but it's still like luck-based, what you find. This game is pure time spent, basically, to unlock better gear. There's no randomness to it, really. It's just you'll eventually unlock everything for your class by just playing these 7 missions over and over again at different difficulties. And so for me, that was like, all right, I played through each one of them, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm done.
I'm good for now.
I don't want to have to go fight the Hive Tyrant again and crush him with another statue. I'm good.
Yep.
You know, it's fun, and I kind of got down. I really got down like the mechanics of the parrying and everything. I played the Phobos Marine class, obviously, as I would. I think one of the strongest classes because of just its capability of just killing elites. Raveners, I don't give a shit. I'm just gonna grapple a launcher to him and just kill him in one hit. That guy was insane. I don't know if you played much of that, but
nope.
The Phobos Marine with his knife and his pistol.
I actually haven't even done operations after I beat the campaign.
Yeah.
Because that's supposed to be where you start playing,
right?
But it's grindy because they're releasing each operation slowly, giving people time to play. The game is still enormously popular online.
Yeah.
Because it is a really good game. We also have been playing the expansion to Diablo 4 of all things.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when the expansion came out, I had forgotten, or then I remembered, that when Diablo 4 originally released several years ago, I downloaded it day one. I played till my character was level 8, and then have not played it since.
Which is basically the prologue of the game.
Yeah. So my login information for Blizzard was just no good anymore. I didn't, whatever. And then when I had logged in to download the expansion, I then saw everybody I used to play with had also not logged in at least over a year. So then I set about like going through the campaign, going through the story mode before starting the new stuff, because I didn't know anything about the game. So I've been doing that too.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Not bad.
It doesn't have the magic that Diablo 2 had.
I don't think anything can.
Right? It's just so it's like it's hard to capture without just copying it.
Yep.
Right. I mean, there was things going behind the scenes in Diablo 2 that the players had to figure out that aren't told to you, right? With like certain areas being certain eye level drop zones and this kind of to like farm specific items and things like that. There's a lot going on in the background of that game. More modern games, they kind of dumb it down for you a little bit, right? They make it so that it's like, well, we're not going to worry about you leveling. We're just going to get you to level max, whatever the max is, and then once you're max, then we'll start worrying about playing the game for real. I hate the aim of reaching max level and then the game starting.
And the playing the game for real is really just repeat grinding. Yeah. Now what I can see, which I haven't even taken to any of the multiplayer yet, but just from the map, the sheer number of dungeons and side quests, you at least have a wide variety of grinds.
Yeah.
But you can tell that's what it'll be.
Yeah.
It is a farming game.
There's plenty of like world quests to do, and there's a massive amount of like points of interest in each of the 5 or 6 large zones, there's like
the Tree of Whispers, which you'll get to, ends up really good.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff to do. So I mean, I'm not going to run out of things, and it does feel like Diablo when you're playing it.
Correct.
Like I said, the only catch though is it's like the goal was to get to max level. I feel like in Diablo 2, which I think was the best one.
Yep.
We can agree.
Easy.
The game was proper and real when you were at like level 55 through 70. Like I don't think I got many characters beyond level 75. Right, even the max was 99.
Mm-hmm.
The highest level I ever had was like maybe 90. I never got a 99 character.
Yeah, I don't know if
I've never played a character that because there's very specific things you could do to get experience anymore once you got high enough level. Mm-hmm. Like you started only getting experience off of Bale's
Bale runs, yeah.
His 4th and 5th wave of his council and then him were the only things that gave you experience anymore, and you had to do it 42,000 times to go from 98 to 99.
Yep.
Like it was absurd. It was something like that. But like I said, it's the game still very much feels the same.
Well, even the story was good in Diablo 2.
Yeah. Well, it was okay.
you had to puzzle solve, and
you did. It didn't tell you straight out what you need to do, right?
Yep.
Like even in Act 1, it's like, hey, I got this problem. It's like, all right, well, where is it? This cemetery? Well, I know the cemetery is off of this other zone. That doesn't give you a an actual map with a waypoint and a path to follow, and then a map marker, and like it didn't hold your hand like that.
No.
But most Diablo games, I feel like they leave very simple stories that allow the gameplay to take over instead of the story itself, right? Because even like Diablo 2, not much happens in that story if you really think about it. You're pursuing a guy. You pursue him through one zone. You pursue him through a second zone. You pursue him through a third zone. You figure out where he is. And you kill him.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like there's not too much going on there, but it's like the lore around what's happening on the larger scale is what keeps you hooked.
And the world seemed neat.
Yeah.
And similar to that, whatever the guy's name in Talrash's tomb, the guy who's imprisoned under there, and the whole time it turns out it was Bale. Like, and like some of that ended up neat. But they just took that concept, and then like in Diablo 3, they gave you one good story, which was up to the Skeleton King, which was so good. Yeah, but that's what they gave everybody in the demo.
Yeah.
And so after that, then
there was not a single good part of that story until you hit the expansion.
Nope.
Like I liked the Angel of Death.
Yep, that was super cool.
I liked that city. I liked the aesthetic. I liked going through that. But going to heaven was awful.
Yep.
The zone was crappy. The aesthetic of it was bad. The enemies, they're all the weird like demon shark people, whatever they were. Like I did not like Act 4 of that game. Act 3 was completely inconsequential. No, Act 3 was where you kill Asmodan. That was
yep.
cool. I liked
Asmodan was all right.
I liked the battlefield, but the Act 2 in that game was completely inconsequential. Yep. Like, what did you go there for? What was the purpose?
They wanted to give you a loot go lane parallel.
I mean, it's very similar to how most of the stuff that happened in Act 2 of Diablo 2 was inconsequential. Because it's like, what happens? You get there, Tyrael shows up and says, you're too late.
Yep.
You didn't do anything. You got to the tomb and you unlocked it, and he's already gone. Like, you could have skipped it and gone right to, you know what I mean? Like, it's like Indiana Jones, right? Almost, where it's like, if he wasn't there, nothing would have changed.
Yep.
Same for you a little bit in that. I mean, you get the cube, I guess.
Yes.
That was useful. But, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of funny, but this one I've been really liking it so far.
Because the gameplay, once I like ignored the stupid parts of the story, and even when they have a moment in the story that's cool, some of the cinematics will be neat. The voice actors they got are neat, but then like the insufferable Tyrael character is just one flub after another, and they're very illogical. They don't make sense. And they just want to skip you through that. And where in the world's Carmen Sandiego? You're just behind Lilith by a step again.
Yeah.
But then when you need to, they just insta teleport you to beat her to a spot when you have to eventually fight her.
I've gotten to a point where...
But you're right, the gameplay is still Diablo.
I've gotten to the point in the game, spoilers, I guess, for the original game, where I've just battled... I've stopped the gestation of some 3-headed dog monster.
Yep.
And it gets away, and I'm going to, I guess, defeat that at the end of Act 2 kind of thing.
Yeah,
because there's apparently a trio of 3 druid knights that defeated some demon a long time ago that is somehow important to the story, but that wasn't made clear yet. right? Because like the story so far has been, oh well, she's alive. She made it to the tomb of the first necromancer, who was killed by Inarius, the good guy angel, supposedly.
Yeah.
And Inarius killed him with a spear that had a key in it, but he didn't know the key was inside, but somehow Lilith did. So she shatters the spear and gets the key to hell. But I don't know what her game is after that. I don't know why she's resurrecting this weird demon dog. I don't know what the purpose of that is. I don't like some of that, and I'm listening. I'm not skipping anything. I'm listening to the dialogue, and it's just not clear to me where the story is going and why she's deciding to do what she's doing.
And it does that for like the length of the story, where you keep getting these pieces that lead you in a different direction than where you were just going, because it's not connected to the previous one, and then it's a long time before it connects to itself again.
I got Act 2 and 3 quest lines before I even completed Act 1, so I could have just abandoned that and just moved on.
And
which is bizarre.
Well, and there's the other thing that I think 2 especially, but even 3 kind of did, is when you completed an act, there was a fanfare to it, there was a sense of finality.
There was a loading screen.
And you had to leave. You left the act. Like, now it's just like, now it's nothing. You'll be like, I had it just come across my screen as an achievement on the left, and it was like, you completed Act 4, and I was like, oh, I didn't know I thought I was still in Act 2. Like, and then you don't warp anywhere, you just walk somewhere, like, yeah.
It's just over, and you're like, well, I guess I gotta just walk home, I guess.
Go to a town portal and find,
Yeah, so a bit of that. I mean, I've really enjoyed like the side quests. There's some good like stories being told for like world building with that.
When I was able to get past the story, it was like it's just more Diablo. It's visually upgraded Diablo.
Yeah. Now, I was gonna say that I think there's it's a good template for other games, because other games do the same kind of thing. There's a new one coming out called Titan Quest 2. 3 Titan Quest, one of the Titan Quest games. The game, maybe I think THQ made them a long time ago, but they're doing a sequel because someone acquired it. I don't know if you ever played Darksiders.
Nope.
Well, it was a game where you played as one of the 4 horsemen. You were playing as War, and then the company that had it failed, and they sold off the IP, and then they made another one, Darksiders 2, where you played as Death instead of War, but it was basically the same game. It was weird, but there's a lot of that kind of going on where someone's trying to acquire an IP and then resurrect it. That's what this new game is going to be, but it's a very similar Diablo type of game. They've had Path of Exile going on forever, almost as long as Diablo 2. Path of Exile's been around. But I think there's room to do it in the Warhammer universe, where this type of game would actually really work for the Warhammer universe. I mean, they did a couple already, right? They did one for 40K called Inquisitor, which was weak. They did one for fantasy called Chaos Bane.
Yep.
But again, it was like it was so weak because we were just on the rails the whole time. There wasn't any side questing and world to like explore, and it was just like, here, go do this next thing and just play in order, right? Until you get to the end game, and then you can redo the game basically in small bits at higher level and farm it. It was that kind of stuff. It just didn't hit. It just didn't land right. But I mean, I can see it, right? With all these different like types of games, there's room for Warhammer games to be made in that same style. I mean, we're talking about Total War, right? You can go all kinds of places with Total War.
Yep. In
the different Warhammer franchises and stuff. Like, I want more of that, because Warhammer is becoming more mainstream. A lot more people know what it is, and even like it who've never even played it. And that's capitalize on that. You know what I mean?
I think there's an element to the folks at GW. We've talked about this in other veins, who haven't embraced how much bigger it really is. I think they still think it's like this.
It's underground, basement, garage.
Beer and pretzels, it's UK mostly.
Yeah.
Like it is how they view it, and it's like, and so some of their IP gets spread out and feels like that. And then even some of the decisions they make with their tabletop games feel like that.
They sell the license to a really small company to develop some weird app game that's tiny. It's like, why are you dealing with those small peanuts?
And it's just a micronomics gotcha game.
It's like, why are you doing that? Fucking license out some gigantic AAA titles.
Yeah.
Like, get that shit out there.
Because look, when they do, even when it's handled in a way that's relatively simply, you end up with Space Marine 2, which is a massive hit.
Yeah.
You end up with Total War, which is a massive hit. Like, yeah.
I want to see that. I want to see more of that.
Yeah. Which they do have their license with Amazon.
Yep.
Starting to produce some stuff. There's that series of there's a show that Amazon's doing. It's like their version of Black Mirror or whatever, but instead of horror, it's like sci-fi. And they're doing episodes that take place in famous sci-fi worlds from video games, board games, whatever. And one of the episodes is a 40K episode, which is kind of neat. So, and I think it actually continues a story of what's his name from Space Marine?
Titus?
Yeah.
Okay. Which that, spoilers, that ended on a cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we know they're going to be expanding that game and going further with that.
They have to, yeah.
Who knows what they're going to do after that? Like, if this... So the ultimate threat in Space Marine 2 was actually Tzeentch.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there was a Thousand Suns Chaos Sorcerer who was pulling some strings in a Necron area
Tomb World.
Was being dabbled on by the AdMech.
Mm-hmm.
But the Tyranids were just there.
Yep.
The Tyranids were not the threat, really. It was like there was a planet that the Tyranids were taking over, and they're like, well, this planet's lost. Just ignore it. Let's go to this other planet in the same system and deal with the actual real threat, which is chaos.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like... I felt like at the end of that game, when you finish off with Tzeentch, I was a little confused where it's like, well, you got more Tyranids to deal with. What are you guys celebrating for and sending off this soldier to go do something? Like, you still got more to do, guys.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I think there is an Exterminatus done on one of the planets to cripple that hive fleet, which you see in one of the side missions. Is you like nuke basically the feeder like tendril spires that are coming down from the hive ship, the space organism for the Tyranids, and it's like, it like connects to the planet with a big pillar, and it
there's
sucks
chimney spores and feeder tendrils, and
so you like blow it up and you cripple it and you collapse that hive ship onto the planet or something. They like Exterminatus it, which maybe that was enough to have crippled that splinter fleet or something. And they're like, problem solved, move on kind of thing. I don't know. I felt like that was left a little open ended,
I guess with Tyranids as a villain, it's tough to write because they don't have machinations. They don't have deeper plans and desires. It's like food, so that's what they do.
I need to eat to grow my hive fleet, and then the hive fleet splits off into smaller ones, and they need to go get more biomass to expand themselves, and it's just a cycle of just growth.
Yep.
Just eating and growing.
Yeah. They don't make allies. They don't do anything. There's no commander to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But in the tabletop world, we have a small amount to talk about, I guess, this week.
Yeah, James Workshop did his little holiday video,
which I do like that they're continuing that little gag. It is pretty funny.
Yeah, and the video gag spoiler. He was talking about how he was spending this time wanting to make a mini about himself, and then the Red Gobbo foiled his plans because that's what the Red Gobbo does. And we got our annual Christmas model, which is
another goblin with a grenade snowballs this time around. Whatever, it's fine.
Because it was the squig eating presents last year, right?
Yep, and the one before that was he was tossing dynamite down a chimney. Something. But we have the new season box of Underworlds pre-order this weekend.
Yeah.
Not sure what's going to be next weekend.
They did spend a lot of time on the website about that, so I think they're hoping it.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see next weekend, so 3 weeks out from now, because we'll see it revealed Sunday. We get news about Slaves of Darkness, Battletome.
Oh right.
I wouldn't be surprised because that'd be put us mid-November.
It's supposed to come out before the end of this year.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
We're still the model in a book.
Yeah, we're still waiting on another update for 40K, which will be out sometime at the end before the end of the year.
I think so.
Hopefully.
Two of them by number 2, close together.
Yeah.
And there was some reason for it. I think they wanted the other one out before the World Championship.
Right.
But
they don't want to shake it up too much.
Right.
To deal with a bunch of different stuff, which it sounds like the next update is to be much larger.
Yeah.
To encompass more sweeping changes than this, because the World Championship, didn't it get canceled even? Is that the one?
That was the last U.S. Open was because Hurricane was on the way. Yeah. Gotcha. I rather like Games Workshop's approach to these update phases of the 2 core games, because like if they just went by what the fans wanted strictly, you'd have changes that are way too wild.
Right.
At times, you'd have stuff that just like flat out gets banned, and they take these like it's slow and it's subtle most of the time. Every now and then it's big, but it's like they like are easy about their
right.
Take it easy on what we're going to change and how much. Because sometimes that's really all it boils down to is a percentage or two of something is too strong or too weak, or a rule just ever so slightly doesn't function. So I think you're right. I think they did this like subtle pass for 40K update just a couple weeks ago, but they did announce before the end of the year we've got another one. Mm-hmm. And so I'm guessing maybe that, but I think they wanted to get through Worlds before shaking it up too much so people didn't have to possibly radically change lists. That's just a guess. Because they might have already submitted their list for that, or whoever's qualified is qualified.
It's like locked in. That would be such a kick if you completely changed, game rules on people when they
or even how a certain army functions.
Required them to change their list before a thing because you wanted to, make a change like that. That's kind of
well, and so they're picking the downtime season. Like,
right.
You pick this in between Spawn and Holidays where all they're doing is releasing bundles for sale of existing stuff. Mm-hmm. And the next big event's not till LVO, which is in January. And so now you can introduce big things more than a month from that, and so people have time. Which some of our folks are at an event today.
Yep. Yeah, we've got a local one here in the Midwest called Mid-Mo.
Yep. Middle of Missouri.
Which is down in Ashling?
Yeah, about 20 minutes south of Columbia.
Yeah. And it's a medium-sized tournament.
It's a GT.
It's
64 people.
Enough people, right, to really qualify as being like a real event. Like, we have the local ones that are kind of meaningless, where we've got like 16 people, 3-rounders that don't really tell anything about anything,
But they're good for players to get reps.
Absolutely.
And it ends up a good shopping day for the store because people will buy stuff while they're there. But like Iowag, which we host locally, is similar to Midmo. It's that 64 plus sort of size. So it's GT, 5 rounds, 2 days. And so we've got a handful of people who went to it this year, hoping they do well. One of them was going there for her first major event. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, because there's something to be said about when you're first starting to get into like the tournament play, right? Because it's like we might have been talking about it last week, but part of playing a game is remembering all of your things that your army can do, right? I hate spectating a game, and people are like, "Oh, well, this game should have gone differently because, this in turn 2, I actually had this rule that I should have used in order to do this, which would have killed this unit, and all the stuff that this
then you couldn't have done that thing.
All this stuff that this unit did throughout the game. Now it wouldn't have been able to do that because it wouldn't have been there." And it's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But did you remember that ability? Did you remember to use that thing? Did you remember to, No, you didn't? Well, that's part of the game, is remembering everything you can do and using it at the right time. If you don't tell me that your unit can do this, I'm not going to remind you that your unit can do that, because that's an advantage to me. Well, even if I recognize that it can do that, I'm just going to say, you're choosing not to do it, or you've forgotten it.
And that happens in competition in any field, sports, right. Whatever. And it's funny is I think simulation has to a degree, this could be its whole other subject a whole subject on its own, has like hindered people's ability to remember triggers.
Well, we were talking about it with the difference between playing Magic in person versus playing an arena, because arena it stops the game when you can do something to react to your opponent's movement.
Yep.
Right. They play a card. The game says, "Whoa, hold on. Do you want to react to this? Here are 2 highlighted cards that you could actually play right now, because you have the mana required, and it has a trigger that it comes off of this. Do you want to use it?" You can be like, "Yeah, sure, I'll use it," and then you counter it. Well, if you didn't remember you had a counter spell in your hand and you're playing on the tabletop, nothing is reminding you. There's not some guy sitting next to you and be like, "Hey, you should interrupt here and use your counter spell. Do you want to do that?" There's nothing telling you to do that. And so, it's like with, video games in general. A video game version of anything, right, is so much different than playing it analog.
Yep.
Even if it's like Baldur's Gate, like the D&D 5e set. So much that happens in a video game is just done without you noticing it. Whereas you need to remember to do this stuff when you're talking it out, or you're playing with paper, right? Same goes for this, where it's like, if you practice and everyone is, even if it's someone else telling you how to play the game, it's still not beneficial for you as a player learning it. You need to get in there and figure it out yourself and remember your shit, not have someone sit there and remind you can do this.
Right. And we're not even, this isn't even like a spirit of the game or sportsmanship type thing. It's like, it's not incumbent upon the opponent to remind them of everything they can do.
Yeah.
So the Magic example is great because Arena's done that. Even the old Magic Online show, which is now like 20 years old, that still gets used. It does the same thing. There'll still be like this little highlight around the card. Every trigger automatically happens. Whereas with Paper Magic, it's one thing if it's something that has to happen versus something that may happen. And the players are supposed to know both.
Right.
Because if you skip a has to happen, like a judge can give you an infraction actually. And if you skip a may happen and you allow something to resolve and you didn't opt for your may, but the game state has moved on, you can't go back.
Right.
So like it is important to learn and remember all your stuff. And at Warhammer, it's no different. Warhammer, of course, 40K especially, has just got a deep, heavy set of rules. And it's, if you don't remember your stuff, you're gonna have gotcha moments where really savvy opponents are gonna kind of speed play through your stuff and you'll forget.
Right. And it feels bad, right? Because you moved on. The game state is already changed. And you say, all right, well, I'm going to do this. And you're like, oh, I should have done this. It's like, yeah, you should have. We're past it. Like, you kind of have to, especially in a tournament. If it's a friendly environment, it's a friendly game.
Right. Small, it's a learning moment. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, okay, redo your thing that you should have done.
Yep.
That's fine. But, like, when we're playing a tournament, it's like, you moved past it. That was a phase ago.
You took your finger off the chess piece.
We're not going back and redoing that because you realized that this movement you made here wasn't good enough to put you in range and you needed some backup contingency. And you didn't move this over here when you should have, because you were, like, your decision making could have been intentional in that moment, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I didn't pull off it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. So now let me backtrack and get more allocated to this.
Let me take a mulligan.
It's like, no, I'm sorry. It just doesn't work that way. You get it right the first time or you move on and you let it go, right? It feels bad, but sometimes it's like, your opponent may think, well, you only won the game because I forgot to do this. It's like, maybe. Who knows? That might have been the only reason because you didn't play your army as well as you could have.
And so now you, sir, who lost because you didn't do the thing, or you think that's why you lost. Like, so what are you going to take away from that?
Yeah, not that like, well, I'm the best player, but my opponent didn't let me take this thing back. You're going to take that away? You'd be like, well, next time I'm not going to forget to use that. Right. So that's the better mentality.
We may have talked about this before. It's like cliche to say, like, learn from your losses. But it's so true. Did I give this example on our podcast before? It was actually, but when I learned that most profoundly was watching an arm wrestling match.
I don't think we've ever talked about arm wrestling.
Okay.
I might be wrong.
But it was a professional setting, two top of the class guys going at it. And
so I think I know where we're going. I think you and I have talked about this.
Yeah, and it's a best of 5 is what they were doing. So 3 out of 5. And they get the ready go. They start for their first round, and arm wrestler A gets a pin on arm wrestler B, but the ref then calls a foul. You get 2 fouls, and then it's a loss. They do the ready go again. Arm wrestler A gets the pin again. Ref calls a foul again. So instead of being up 2-0 with 2 pins, he's down 0-1. Now he goes up and he wins the next 2, and he's up 2-1, but he gassed himself out. The other guy scratched and clawed, came back, got the win. So everyone watched the replay and analyzed it. The ref didn't make a good call on the foul. It wasn't according to how the rules were supposed to be. And so everybody goes to arm wrestler A, who lost the match 2-3. And they're like, the refs were bad. Here's the video footage. Like, what did you think of that? He doesn't even shake his head yes, like he's in agreement the refs was bad. He never says anything about the referees. He just says, what I learned is in rounds 4 and 5, where he got me, was he was able to push my elbow off the back of the pad. So I know I've got to work on that element of my inside game, which all that terminology might not mean anything to anybody listening. But it was like, his mindset there is like someone who then goes on to keep winning. Right. Because he took away from the loss, even if it was to a degree where he would have gotten cheated, he didn't focus on that. He focused on, you know what though? This guy showed me I've got a weak spot.
2 rounds of this best of 5, he did beat me.
He did beat me.
And with the game state where it was,
Yep.
those 2 wins that he got where he beat me, let him win.
Correct.
I need to work on that. Because if I would have given him 1 from a foul,
right,
I still should have been able to win the rest of them and still won the entire match.
And what that leads to him then going back to the gym and working on, as opposed to him sitting there saying like, I should have won, but those refs sucked. Mm-hmm. Now he's not going to change anything. He'll come across another opponent or get a rematch, and the guy can exploit the same flaw. And in something like Warhammer, it's not much different. When you go to bed at night and you think, or you're talking to your friends the next day, and you think it's my opponent's dice got so hot, or I forgot this one stratagem that we had already talked about, but he wouldn't let me go back. Mm-hmm. And that's what you focus on. That's why you lost.
My strategy was flawless, but dice.
Yep.
It's like you can't focus on that.
By the way, we're not saying dice doesn't happen.
It does.
Absolutely. Especially when you roll that many.
But here's the thing with dice, is that it doesn't care about your feelings.
Nope.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be statistical every single time.
Correct. Because it's an RNG.
You might get evenly, like perfectly statistical dice over the course of a game, but if you get hot in the beginning and cold at the end, the game is completely different than if you got cold in the beginning and hot at the end.
Correct.
Right? Because
if you were medium all the way through.
The game state can be just different based on when you get the spikes in the statistics, right? If you roll really good at the beginning and you kill a lot of your opponent's army, all of a sudden they're rolling so many fewer dice later in the game, right? Whereas if you let them live for the first turn and they get the first turn of their own with full army, like it's a different game state.
Yeah.
Even if you get those hot dice the next turn, sometimes it's too late, right? Like there's too many things to consider.
And this, I'm not patronizing when I say dice also don't have memory. They don't know if you rolled 6 dice and you get 5 6s on there. They don't know that means they shouldn't roll that again in the next 6 rolls.
Right.
And so when you throw those dice down again, you could get a bunch of 6s again or a bunch of 1s. So like, I think people relying on that math, I've always, even going back to the 90s when I first learned the game and you go on to old forums and they're talking about math, there's like, it's one thing when you're doing the math based on the stats and what the number of dice should help you get or overcome, things they implement in the game to mitigate it. Like 40K is notorious for rerolls to do that. AOS, they don't really do rerolls. It's you can get bonuses here and there. Which,
I mean, you say that. I watched some egregious rerolling.
Oh, I didn't play or my army and my opponents. There were never rerolls.
I'm sorry, that was in 40K. It was a 40K.
Yeah, 40K. There's rerolls everywhere.
40K orcs were just.
In AOS, it's hard to even find the word reroll on something. But either way.
Ugh. Yeah. Reroll charges, is the most common thing we get.
Yeah, but either way, there's stuff in game systems to try to mitigate the random to put more in your hands. But you still have to roll the dice and you still have to play. And there's just that chance that the dice will get hot and the dice will get cold. What are you going to do?
Right.
If that happens, so.
It's I think a great player compared to a good player is knowing how to fight their way out of any situation.
Knowing your outs.
Right? Is looking at the game state and being like, all right, what's my best options here to help me get towards victory, right? So, I think actually, if you do this in practice, right, you set yourself up in bad situations to practice getting out of bad situations, you become a better player, right? So if you, consider say you ever run a shooting where you did no damage, right?
Which happens
to an enemy unit. You'd be like, okay, we'll think about that instead of being like, I rolled all this dice and failed. Say I couldn't see that unit, or they're out of range or something. Like, think of it that way. It's not like the unit missed and did nothing. It'd be like, what if it was a positional error and I couldn't actually see the enemy? This unit couldn't do anything then. Well, let's play assuming I couldn't fire this unit.
Yep.
Sorry, didn't mean to hit that. As that kind of a thought experiment. And then it's like, okay, well, if this unit can't shoot because it did 0 damage, what are my other options? What could I have done for redundancy? What should I have done different next time that in case this happens again to me, that I have a backup plan for what I can, remove that unit with something else. Have like a priority list for each unit that like they can do multiple things. You're able to like mitigate some of those dice failures. That kind of thing. I mean, we do that. Talk about with Magic all the time, right? Like play against a net list that is curving perfectly
Yep.
How does your deck do against it when you were drawing randomly, right? We want them to play optimally, and I want to be able to beat them with their optimal play. It's like practicing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because practicing and playing are very different.
Yeah.
And even circling back to the athlete reference, a lot of times when athletes practice, they if it's a combat sport, boxing, MMA, or arm wrestling, they put themselves, besides the work they do in the gym, which I guess for Magic or Warhammer, that would be the reading, the studying. And then they go and they spar. Now you get a live body in front of you. Or in Warhammer, you go to the table and you're going to play some reps. What those guys do when they practice, they don't, like boxers, they don't just ring the bell and then fight 3-minute rounds for 12 rounds like a fight. They go in there and they let their sparring partner beat the shit out of them.
Right. Because that's valuable, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm not going to swing at you at all.
Yep.
Me as the boxer who's training, I just want you to swing at me and beat the shit out of me. Because I'm going to learn how to dodge. I'm going to learn how to take a hit. I'm going to learn how to do this. Because punching is one thing, but like there's more to boxing than just throwing punches at your opponent.
And it not only gets your body used to it, the concussive force, it also makes you not afraid of the punch.
Right.
And then they do eventually, of course, work on throwing punches. They have someone emulate the style of the opponent they got coming up. But practice is so valuable in Warhammer, where it's like, well, if you're getting ready for a tournament, no, we're not just going to post up 2,000 points, pick a mission, and rack up for round one. It's like, well, how about what is the thing you want to get good at, or what is the army you're afraid of?
Right.
Let's practice that situation.
And sometimes it's things not like matchups. Sometimes it's just like having an idea for how to set up your player place terrain.
Or this one mission I've always had a problem with.
Or a specific mission. Or your spacing, right? It's like, okay, well, let's practice setting up and eyeballing ranges and eyeballing spacing and doing the math for like maximum theoretical charge ranges and things like that. And like getting some of that information under your cap. So you can actually like, okay, I'm doing this matchup. Well, I know that their range is this far. If I'm right here, they cannot get to me. Stuff like that.
You said something a little bit ago, and it is a difference between like good players and great. And there's a lot, I think, of good players. There's very few great. And we had an example, and not to go off game again. I know this podcast's been like all over, but we just had the Magic the Gathering World Championships that took place. So you had 113 qualified players, and these are the players who either were the best in the world for years, and so they've accumulated points to qualify, won Pro Tour events, are previous world champions, are Hall of Famers who have forever status, or they were the best this year. Those two groups of people were in here. So it's players who are just know that game at peak level. While it's going on, there's like a Twitch chat, right? And then you've got individual content creators doing a stream of it alongside, and they have their followers. And then you had all the content creators after Worlds who were then playtesting the decks that did well at Worlds. And the philosophy of the good players, which are those in the chat and the streamers, versus the great, who were these ones at Worlds, is very different. Because the good ones would look at those and say, well, what deck won? And it's like, well, why don't you give credit to that guy, Javier Dominguez, who A, has been a world champion before and has finished no worse than 10th at a premier level event for like 2 years. Like, and seeing the difference as a world, because a good player grabs the deck he played, they just tried to play it on a specific curve and they struggled. Where it's like he made plays during the game that seemed counterintuitive almost. But they've taken it to another level of thinking. They know the fundamentals so well because they've practiced that they can bend the rules to a degree. A good player will just like play in a specific order, and then when it doesn't work, they blame the deck or they blame luck. And like that's why they never crack that next barrier. And we see that happen in Warhammer a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of players who are really good.
And it's not any one thing.
No.
Right? Warhammer, yeah. But I see it in other games too. One of the big ones we have locally is Marvel Crisis Protocol, and it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
People will bring their 10-man list and build a thing out of it and play it out and just not win. And then you see someone else play the exact same list and they crush. And it's like, what is the difference here between these two players? It's the fundamentals. It's the decision making. It's the making plays that aren't obvious. It's the 2 steps ahead play instead of the 1 step ahead play.
And knowing
stepping back and then instead of charging forward when you need to. Yeah, it's that kind of stuff.
And knowing your outs is big.
Yeah.
They do math. The best players, they essentially card count is how you think of it. They know everything that can happen from this point on, and then they know the probability based on what you do and how that changes what's happened.
And with cards, it is different than dice.
It is,
because you can't in Magic, you can't draw the same card 50 times in a row.
Right.
Because you have a maximum of 4 of any card, besides lands, as we know. Yep. So, like, in your deck, there's a limited number of resources of a specific kind.
And you know exactly how many are in your hand, how many are on the table, and how many are in your graveyard.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, with that, you can kind of anticipate a little bit that, okay, if I've run into this specific card, the Blue Sun Zenith, whatever, 3 times, there's a very low chance they're top decking another one. If they've already used 3 of them, there's a low chance of it happening.
Yep.
It can still happen. But it's not it's not a 1 in 6 chance of them getting that.
Yep.
Like you could with a dice. If it's like, well, they need to roll a 6 in order to succeed on this, there is a 1 in 6 chance they roll that 6 every single time.
Every time.
On a tabletop. Because the dice, again, has no memory. It's not weighted. It doesn't have to balance out.
Nope.
It doesn't have to. It probably will over a certain number of rolls.
Thousands of rolls, right.
But it doesn't, in this limited set, within the next 3 or 4 rolls forward and backwards, it's not going to necessarily be statistical. It doesn't need to be, and it probably won't. Nope. And so it's like a different mentality, but you still need to know this is possible. This is the chances of it happening. Factor that into your decision making and your planning going forward.
And it's something to be said, like the decision tree in gaming is difficult. It's a skill. Yeah. Like it's something you have to practice. Like some people might have a proclivity for it, but or pick it up easier. But like you got to work on that.
Yeah.
The list. I think fewer and fewer games are becoming like list hammer, like where the list itself wins, and now your decision tree is going to decide more. Right. And you have to put yourself in optimal positions, knowing that the dice could be hot or cold, but you still got to make the best decisions.
Yep. And so the people we know that are at Minmo,
hopefully they will make a lot of really good decisions,
including one person who we were mentioning who was brand new, first GT. I mean, could go great, could not go great.
Right.
Who knows? It depends on how much they have practiced. It depends on luck of the day. You know, generally, if you prepare a lot and you've got notes that you don't forget everything, that's a big step. And in tabletop gaming, of course, matchup's a consideration. You can get a style matchup that's hard. But if I have to give her credit for one thing, it was knowing that this was a vast rule set without much experience in the game. She tried to condense it down to this like simple 2 pages of notes to like don't forget these things. And I think that's great until you learn more of the ins and outs of the games and the tactics that everyone else is going to use. Make it simple so you're not overwhelmed. Stick to that, and then like I think that gives you some freedom to improvise then, and then not be stressed if you just lose. Right.
Because it can happen.
But I think she's going into it assuming she's not going to win.
Right.
Which is probably fair.
Right. Less pressure, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
It's if you set yourself up to just like, I want to not embarrass myself in my games. Like that's a low bar to set.
Yep.
Right. Setting a goal of like, I want to win one of my 5 games is probably a reasonable one. Right. You play enough games, you play a few games, you're in the loser's bracket if you've lost your first game. Not saying she'll go into loser's bracket, right?
No,
but it's like the more you play for the day, the lower quality your opponents become, kind of, right? And so like the more games you go, if you keep playing it out, there's a better chance of you winning one, right? So it's like it's not a bad assumption to like not a bad goal to saying I want to win one of my later rounds.
I want to win one this tournament,
right?
One game.
I mean, I've gone tournaments where I haven't won any.
Yep,
a lot of them actually, because sometimes I play a goofy thing, or I've not prepared. I'm out of date with what the rule set is.
Right.
I don't know what the current lists are. My list that I bring is just a lot of stuff I own. I do that kind of stuff all the time, where it's like I like the theme of this list. I'm going to do it. Oh, it's not very good. Yeah, I lost all my games.
Yep,
it happens. And like in that kind of a game, tabletop that is, losing a game doesn't mean oh man I got completely obliterated. It's not like chess. It's a winner takes all kind of thing, right? It's a qualified victory. It's a qualified loss. You can have a major victory where you get obliterated. That exists, but generally you're not getting 0 points.
No.
You know,
pretty hard
your loss is because you've got fewer victory points than your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So you could play a good game where your list gets you 50 or 60 victory points out of 90 because you get 10 for painting, but then your opponent scores 85 out of 90, right? So you did a respectable job getting 60 points, but it wasn't more than 85.
Nope.
And so you lose. But that's not to say, like, my list was bad, I played bad, you know, whatever. Like, that's still a respectable loss. If you lose 90 to 10, that's brutal.
Yeah, you got beat everywhere.
Right? That's brutal. You might need to reconsider what's going on then. You know, consider maybe the list that you brought isn't good, that isn't able to accomplish anything in the game, because that's ultimately what the things you need to do in the game is be able to accomplish objectives, because that's how you win. It's not about just killing your opponent's army anymore. Like, I could load my board with just guns and just shoot your army off the board.
Well, and I think there's a large contingent of players who come from that era of that you just have to kill your opponent's stuff, and they still play now.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that they've actually, they've not only not progressed, but they've almost, backslid a bit, because they still think that way. They still think, well, how can I kill as much of my opponent's stuff on turn one as possible? This is in 40K. And they still try to play that way, and then they're getting outscored by a lot.
Yeah.
Because they just don't even really try to think much about the mission.
Finally, I tabled my opponent.
Right.
What's the score now on the top of 5? 75-35? Okay. Well, you tabled me. You still lose.
Yeah.
Because that's how the game is now, right?
Yeah.
It's you lose all your models. Your opponent gets to have free reign of the table. Congratulations. I'm up by enough. You can't outscore me. I win.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. Before, like you said, it was too incentivized for just multiple additions, where it's like if your opponent's army was destroyed, you automatically win. You automatically scored maximum.
Well, there wasn't anything going on with the missions that made them interesting, because they were all just score at the end.
Right.
And so it was like, well, if I just kill my opponent's stuff and then I can go stand on the objectives, I win.
Right.
Plus, you got an automatic X to O at some tournaments if you did table your opponent. And now it's harder to table an opponent for various reasons. One, player plays terrain. Two, they've built defenses a little better into some things, but in stratagems. But now they give you stuff to do turn by turn to score. Right. And there's every turn.
So
it's
almost it's impossible to prevent your opponent from scoring anything.
It's really
because you start on some objectives.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to get some points throughout the game, and so pretty much the first 10 or 20 points of the game that you score are freebies. That should be the minimum you should get.
Yep.
Right. Go stand on a couple of primary objectives.
It's like you didn't forget to put your name on the test part. Go do that. Score points.
Yeah.
And I think in AOS it's even more, because there's just not an army that can really do that alpha, kill everything.
I mean, if you're smart too, you can literally prevent your opponent from getting into range to steal your objectives turn one. You're never getting 0 points.
Right.
It's almost impossible, unless you just don't start on the board and your opponent doesn't start on the board, and then they start first and they just deploy everywhere and they block you out entirely. But that'd be just bad play on your part.
Yeah, then you deserve that.
You deserve it because you didn't start anything on the damn board.
Yeah. Yep.
The null deploy both armies.
Yep.
That would be real funny. Yeah. So, but yeah, we'll see how that. We'll get a rundown for our results at least.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from them yet today.
Yeah.
But
pivoting, new 5th edition General's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide came out this weekend
for Dungeons and Dragons
for D&D 5e
5.5,
5.5.5.5.
Yeah.
5.1, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
The next version
the refresh
of those
5e,
books.
yeah.
Because they've done a lot of work actually to recompile pretty much all the campaign books into the original books, right? The core books. Because so much stuff was released as campaigns went. Stuff was added in Strahd. Some was added in,
Icewind Dale.
All of that. The Dragon Queen, the adventures. So much of that stuff was really cool, and it adds a lot of flavor to D&D, but you had to get all the different books to get it. Well, a lot of that stuff is important now. They've improved, character building in the previous book, which was the Player's Handbook. Lot more interesting things. A little more metagamey, though, because you can tailor your backgrounds to fit what character feat you want to start with, and things like that. But it's fine. Or you completely let it rip however you want to get, and you just get what you get. There's that that type too, where it's like, I just want to be a sailor as my background. Well, you're a barbarian or you're a fighter. You're a wizard with a sailor background. You get tavern brawling. Doesn't matter.
Yep.
I don't care. I wanted to be a sailor. Fine. Like there's those people too. Then it doesn't make any difference.
Nope.
But in the new Dungeon Master's Guide, there's a lot more stuff, magic item tables, and
both these books are pretty
that type of
chunky.
Yeah.
Compared to previous.
I'm really excited for the next one to come out, which is the Monster Manual, because the Monster Manual has so much stuff in it. The current Monster Manual sucks. We were looking through that the other day, and it's like, hey, you want to fight level 1 enemies, or you want to fight level 13 plus enemies?
Pretty much all you got.
That's your options. Yeah. There's so little stuff like in the middle, where it's like, here's early adventure stuff, here's late game stuff. There's nothing in the meat there, which is where most campaigns take place.
Well, that makes sense, I guess, in a way, because a lot of the adventure modules they released were always from levels, like, to take characters from levels 1 to 13. Mm-hmm. And so they put those monsters in there.
Right.
Maybe now they'll be in this new chunkier monster manual.
But it was like level 1, 2, 3 stuff, and then it was like ancient dragons and Tarrasques and zombie lords, CR-17 zombie lords.
Yeah.
It was that kind of stuff. It was like
Archfiends,
it was really high level stuff or really low level. It was hard to find stuff at level 5 to fight. You had the Adiug. You had a veteran.
A Bulette.
That was it.
Yeah.
It was just a couple things. It's like, I want more. Well, the new Monsters book is going to be so many things.
Packed.
And
if it's like these two, I have to imagine it's big.
And they're redoing it all. They've looked at all of it, and they're redoing all of their core stats in accordance with the new player's handbook and how that character process is done. Some of the new monsters will incorporate some of that stuff, the weapon mastery stuff, and new feat effectiveness, things like that. So I'm really excited about that one. It's been a couple months, but I've got to really dig my teeth because I've got it today, so I haven't really looked in the DMG. The DMG yet. So I'm really excited.
How long before the Monster Manual was that? Do we know?
I think it was something like over the course of 6 months they were releasing all 3 of them.
Okay.
It was something like that.
Okay.
So the player's handbook came out during Gen Con, which was in August.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was when the first people could get it, but it didn't come to stores until...
Right, it was a couple weeks after that.
And then DMG, I think we technically got this one 2 weeks early.
Okay. Well, I've got an evaluation copy.
Yep. Because it's got the special cover.
Yep. Special cover because, it's... we need to have experts around to sell it.
Yep.
And talk to people about it when they have questions. So I'm going to evaluate that and look at that.
And that's what we're doing.
Yep.
We're doing it.
We're doing it. Exactly. So
I wonder. I don't know if the Monster Manual is due before the end of the year. I don't know.
It's 2 months in between each then.
Maybe.
Because it's the end of October.
Yeah, it was like September to...
So, that makes sense. So if
maybe
it was...
the new year we get Monster Manual.
It was the new year. That'd be cool.
But it's necessary, too, because what they said they wanted to do with these 3 books is make it so if you did buy campaign or adventure modules in 5e, and maybe you were still in the middle of them or whatever, they didn't want to invalidate those or have to re-release them all.
Right.
And so they're like, well, now you can just, whatever monsters are in there, you can update them to be this.
Or just don't. Just keep playing it.
Or just keep playing it.
Because you don't need to recreate your campaign character using the new 5e book.
No.
Just leave it how they are.
But if you haven't started them yet, but you still own that campaign book that you haven't played.
It's all compatible.
Right.
Yep. The monsters in the book, in the campaign book, might be a little weaker than they might be in the monster manual, but who cares? I don't think I've used a single a monster stat block right out of the box ever. I always give them something else. I feel like most monsters don't have enough health, or they don't hit good enough, or they're something wrong with there's just.
I never feel like they don't hit enough. I always feel like they hit like woof. It's always like, well, this ghoul hit you, and then you roll 7 dice. It's like, what the hell was that? Oh, I'm down. All right,
but your party's not, and you still win.
Yep.
Add some drama. I don't do stats on the fly typically, but I will make things a little harder stat block wise before you fight it. I've whoopsied a couple times. There's one campaign that I believe you were in where I had a CR9 assassin fighting the party, and it turns out they had like a 6d6 sneak attack with 5d6 poison damage on hit kind of thing, and I was just like, ooh, that would have been d4 plus 11d6 damage. That is too much.
That's a lot.
That is the wrong creature for this encounter. Let's errata that on the fly.
Got to.
Yeah. So it's all part of the fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to see, what's new. Especially going back. I'm sorry. Segue back to Warhammer.
Mm-hmm.
D&D done. We'll see what that looks like. In terms of Warhammer, though, Slaves of Darkness is next for AOS.
Yep.
I'm excited about that. I did notice that they are starting to remove stuff from the website that is moving back to the old world.
Right.
They've said the Manticore Lord / Sorcerer. They said the War Shrine.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're losing those from AOS.
Okay.
I think they're going.
Well, I didn't own those models, and I haven't converted one yet.
But the issue with that is now there's literally going to be 0 priests.
0 priests in the army.
In the army, but they have a prayer lore. How the fuck does that work?
So unless they're removing the prayer lore...
Maybe they will. But it's super weird. It's like the only one they had was not even a hero.
And it would seem weird to not have priests in an army with cultists.
Right.
Who follow these deities.
You know what I'd love to see is no more wizards in Dark Oath. They're all priests. And then the wizards can be... That's how you differentiate further. Right? You pray as a Dark Oath.
Right.
You cast spells as a sorcerer.
Because now you're different. Now you've embraced the power.
Exactly.
That would make so much sense. And who knows? The wizard in the book might not be everything, or they've got stuff down the road coming. They just isn't ready.
I did say the chariot was still on the website though,
okay.
So they might be keeping the chariot but cutting the other 2, which I think is a weird one. I'd rather keep the Manticore and lose the chariot.
I just rather make new ones.
I know, but that's the best of all scenarios. Is just make new ones.
Yeah.
But if they're going to keep any of it.
And the Manticore.
I could choose which one. They are probably giving us a new sorcerer, which, I mean, we know there's a new model, but the old one's probably going away. The new one's replacing it. They might not even update the War Scroll for it just because they didn't do it for Stormcast, right? The Lord Celestin on foot, which they made a new kit for, it builds 4 different weapon options. So the same War Scroll.
So I meant to ask you, the new infantry 3-man for Stormcast that came in the starter set with axe and shield.
Yeah.
I saw in their separate release, they also can have 2-handed.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Maces.
Aesthetic.
So that rules-wise, it doesn't matter how you build them. Got it.
Which, feel about that how you like.
Yeah. Well, that's a toss-up for me because I do like that then if you buy the kit,
real cool.
It doesn't matter how you build it.
Yeah.
They play the same. I don't like it if it goes from the other way to that. Mm-hmm. Like if you originally have 2 options and then you just take them all away, not a huge fan.
Which they've done that too. Mm-hmm. Liberators, they didn't give Liberators their second weapon yet.
No,
they may never.
No. They do have a 1 per 10 thing though, right?
They still have a 1 per 5.
1 per 5,
which is the great weapon, the 2-hander.
Gotcha.
So they can take special weapons, but the leader can't take a special weapon anymore. So they nix that. As one normal guy in the squad can take a special weapon, 2-handed weapon. The prosecutors, which are the wing guys, the new ones, don't have weapon options for hammers. They can't take 2 weapons. So the old ones that had that option don't have it anymore. But you just play them as the new ones with, whatever.
I guess there's a pro and a con to that. Like, again, because it's weird. Like when you transition from one edition to another, or through a change, it did suck if you owned a bunch and you built them with the hammers, let's say whatever your unit is, and then you get to the new one and the hammers are either no longer available or the hammers are just really bad. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, I don't want to rip off their arms. I also don't want to buy another $70 kit. So people got stuck. And so I guess if you do this, at least you're now saying however they're built.
But it's also like, what was the point?
Yep.
Because like the Skaven Storm Vermin, again, the leader, the model literally has a hand weapon and a pistol. Mm-hmm. He's holding a pistol in his hand. There's no rules for the pistol. This doesn't do anything. He has to have a gun.
So that aesthetic is valid.
Right.
I mean, your point about that aesthetic is valid because you're talking about a gun. Like I feel like when it's hand weapons, it's whatever. But they're not. Why did you put a pistol?
But they're also not consistent. Is the issue? Yep. As you look at something like Vanguard Paladors for Stormcast, they can take a javelin or an axe. Well, you can throw a javelin, but you can throw an axe.
Hand axes, right?
They are literally different war scrolls. Paladors with javelins, Paladors with shock axes. They do vastly different things in the game. Yeah. They have different point values. But something like that, they might have consolidated in a different war scroll, right? Where it's like, well, we don't care what kind of weapons you have. You just have this.
You have a throwing attack and a melee
attack.
That's it. Yeah.
And so it's like, man, consistency is not a reliable metric. You know what I mean? It's just...
Yeah. Yeah, and it might even show gaps in their design phase.
Right.
Like also, they had this idea to do it this way, and then they changed their mind, but they kept them both. Yeah.
Or they could, I don't know. I think that's ultimately what it was. Is they designed the models and they wanted them to do this thing, but when they wrote the rules, they said, we want to simplify it more than that. It's cool you added all these extra bits. We're not going to write new rules for them. There are 2 war scrolls, one for Reclusians with weapon and shield, and then Reclusians with great maces. They could have done that.
Yep.
Right? They did it with the Annihilators the previous edition.
Yep.
Here's a shield and a hammer, you have a 2-up save. Here's a great weapon, you have a 3-up save, but you hit harder.
Right.
It's the exact same thing with the Reclusians as it was for the Annihilators. It's the exact same thing. Every single model in the unit has a weapon and a shield or a great weapon. Annihilators get 2 different war scrolls and different point values and different stats. The Reclusians do not.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency.
Yeah.
If that was a unit that was going away when the next update, next summer happens, fine. Who gives a shit what they do with those rules? They're going away. Like all the paladins. If they had paladins from the first edition, where they have a glaive and an axe and a hammer and whatever all the different weapons are, and they just said these are paladins with great weapons, and gave them 1 war scroll. And every single one did the exact same thing, and it was all up to aesthetic now, fine. I would be fine with that, because it's going away, too.
Yep.
You know, like, so it doesn't even matter, really. But in terms of just simplifying them, they're all great weapons. They don't all need to do something special and unique and different. Maybe they did initially, they don't anymore. The Dragon Rider, the Dracoth Riders, there's still 4 different ones. And they're going forward with 4 different ones.
Yeah.
And then individual ones. Because if you take a leader riding one, you technically have an extra one left over, so you can take a one-man unit.
Yeah, it's the Pusco Blight Lord thing. Yeah.
And so it's like you could have a hammer and an axe and a spear on them, and they all do different things still. It's like, man, why? Like, the leader doesn't. He can take all those weapons too. He just has weapons of legend now. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's inconsistent. Like, it's just, be consistent about it then.
Yep.
Most cavalry now can take hand weapons or lances, and they're all just swords or lances as the weapon profile. Blood Knights, the heavy infantry for Free Guild, the Free Guild Knights, that's what they're called. It doesn't matter what you choose for them. They're all just, the same weapon profile, this many attacks, +1 damage on the charge. Cool. Aesthetic. Love it.
Yep.
Now if I like lances, cool. If I don't like the look of spears and I want to give them, crazy looking swords and blood swords and cool, I can do that too. I am not penalized for choosing that weapon option.
Yep. Which I like that. Yeah.
But consistency is key. Yeah. Just throw it out there. Mm-hmm. Consistency.
They're moving forward with 4 different Dracoth Riders.
They did. They could have just been Dracoth Riders.
Yep.
Give each one a bolt pistol. Now they have a shooting attack. Because one of them can take a crossbow. It doesn't have a melee weapon. So, if that one was separate and the other 3 melee ones were all 1 war scroll now, I'd be fine with that. I say lovey. But, sometimes having to choose is too much of a burden, especially with things like menus, at a restaurant, for example.
But no matter what they bring you, you want consistency.
You do. But sometimes it also doesn't matter what they bring you because you're just hungry.
Variety is the spice of life.
I've had that happen where I'm like, I order something and they bring me the wrong thing. And I could be like, excuse me, this is the wrong thing. But I look at it, I'm like,
I'm really hungry.
What's it really matter?
That's probably good too.
What's it really matter?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to get full. I'll just eat. Yeah. Speaking of, though,
let's get full.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. We hope you enjoyed. Follow us for more of our weekly episodes on YouTube Podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean. You can follow myself and Llama on Instagram. We are at Llama Paints Minis and Hyena Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.